The following program is part of a college course. These telecourses allow you to earn college credits at home. For more information, contact a college or university near you.
The survival of all animals depends ultimately on the survival of their cells. Animals organize cells into specialized organs and systems, each with a role to play in maintaining the delicate internal balance we call homeostasis. Skin offers protection from the outside world. Skeletons determine shape and size and offer the leverage for muscles to create motion. Though animals display amazing diversity, at the cellular level, they reveal a structural unity that comes from a shared purpose: to protect their internal environment from the hazards of the outside world. On a quiet residential street in Southern California lies Casa de Tortuga, the Turtle House, a private rescue mission for injured or abandoned reptiles.
What we're trying to do here by having this facility and this collection is just to educate the public. And we book a tour every day so people can come and visit, and they're amazed how somebody like Walter Allen would take so much care in preserving these creatures.
It's a hobby, really, that's gotten out of hand. You start with 2 turtles, and you got 10, and the next thing you know, you got 30, and then it's 30 years later, and you got about 700 to 800 running around here.
Even with tender care, some of these reptilian residents struggle to keep healthy. Nature designed these unique body structures for very different surroundings.
Take the desert tortoise, for instance. Think desert first. It's a dry cold. Here in the basin, we have a damp cold, and many will come down with the flu, colds, pneumonia, and the like.
The tortoises become ill because of a breach in their defenses at the tissue level. In all complex organisms, cells work together in groups called tissues, the raw materials that make up all animals on Earth.
You can think of organisms as being comprised of 4 primary types of tissues. Those are the epithelial tissues, connective tissues, muscles, and nerves. Now, epithelium consists of cells that are similar in appearance and that are packed together tightly and of regular shape.
Epithelial tissues are basically used as coverings. There would be coverings on the outer part of the body of interface between the organism and its environment. The epithelia may range from being quite impermeable, as the outer layers of our skin, to very, very highly permeable, as to the epithelium that lines the alveoli of our lungs, where diffusion must be rapidly encouraged.
The permeability of the lung's epithelium also makes it more vulnerable to invading organisms. Epithelia and other tissues combine in the organ we call a lung, which in turn joins other organs in a more complex structure called the respiratory system.
An organ is a differentiated group of tissues that are specialized for specific functions. An organ system is a group of organs that are linked together, and they all have a similar function, and they work together as a unit. So you go from tissue to organ system.
Animals display one of these organ systems right on the surface. The integument, what we call skin, must withstand the greatest exposure to harsh environmental conditions.
Like all systems, human integument includes different individual organs built of 4 kinds of tissues. Flexible connective tissue provides the structural support for organs like hair follicles, glands, and blood vessels, yet still allows the skin to bend and give. Nervous tissues form sense organs that detect changes in the environment, such as a drop in temperature. This often causes the integument's muscle tissues to contract, making hairs stand on end with the familiar tingle of goosebumps. Above it all, layers of protective epithelial tissue form the barrier that serves as our first line of defense against the perils of the outside world.
While the integument of all animals has a similar structure, variations account for different roles in different species. Even between vertebrates such as reptiles and amphibians, we see remarkable differences designed to withstand very different environments.
The reptiles have a large advantage over amphibians as terrestrial animals because of the nature of their outer integument, or epidermis. And like that of mammals, it is relatively impermeable to water, so that a lizard can sit out on a rock in the desert and not dry out, whereas most frogs under that situation would dry out very, very rapidly.
While most amphibians share these properties, some have developed special adaptations. This South American tree frog coats itself with wax produced by glands in its skin. This protects the frog from the drying effects of persistent warm winds. Others display even more peculiar traits.
This frog lives in the arid regions of western Paraguay, and in the dry season when it's burrowed, it allows these skin layers to accumulate to form a cocoon, which provides a protection, an insulation from water loss. Once the rainy season comes, the frog gets wet, his cocoon gets soft, he eats it and emerges to go about his business of feeding and breeding in the short rainy season.
The integumentary system performs another function crucial to survival: temperature regulation.
Many animals allow their body temperatures to rise and fall with the environment and live with these changes in rates, whereas others, such as ourselves, regulate body temperature very precisely, which allows for a very constant environment for the cells. Amphibians in general are not considered to be particularly good temperature regulators. So frogs are probably an example of an animal who is pretty well adapted to function reasonably well at a variety of body temperatures. In reptiles, the temperature regulation system is more behavioral than physiological, so that if a reptile, say in the sun, detects that its body temperature is too high, it will then move out of the sun into the shade, up into a bush or into a burrow, but the net effect is the same. An imbalance has been detected and a corrective action taken.
With their intricate structure of tissues, organs, and organ systems, complex animals can adapt to a wide range of conditions and still maintain the critical balance of homeostasis. But there are limits. Because of their weakened condition, the residents of Casa de Tortuga can never be returned to the wild. For these reasons, Walter Allen continues his vigil while encouraging us to leave these exceptional animals in their native habitat.
I would love to educate everybody in the world, but I know I can't do that. I'm trying to do all I can here in Southern California. And I do educate people. Almost every day I educate one person at least.
We have a snorkel for our nose.
All animals adapt to the environment in which they live. Under normal conditions, we take the operation of our bodies for granted. But in a different environment, our complex organ systems perform in extraordinary ways. Here in microgravity, the muscles of astronauts seem to do the impossible. But this comes at a price.
Movement is much simpler in space because you don't have to exert as much energy in moving about. But the problem is, once you return from that space environment, the muscles have to be reconditioned and reprogrammed to support the body back in the one gravity environment.
There is muscle weakness and there is faintness. The problem is when they return to Earth, even with all the exercise and countermeasures they do, they cannot walk unassisted for at least 48 hours.
A lot of the deterioration that we see in our astronauts in space, it's just an accelerated form of what we see in the aging process. They atrophy, they get smaller, they lose their strength-generating capability, so the individual is severely weakened.
Scientists are studying the muscles of astronauts and other space travelers to determine what can prevent atrophy. To do so, they must examine muscle contractions at the cellular level.
Skeletal muscle contains many bundles of cells or fibers which are controlled by the nervous system. Nerve impulses spread across the surface of each fiber and deep into the cell's interior. From the surface, the impulse travels down a system of tubules, then into membranous compartments which release their reservoir of calcium ions. These ions trigger the reactions that cause each muscle cell to contract.
When the muscle fiber is electrically excited, it induces organelles within the muscle to release calcium. And we think of calcium as the triggering device that will actually allow a transformation to take place.
Deep inside each cell, we find the molecules responsible for muscle contraction, thin filaments of the protein actin, and thicker filaments of myosin, a protein with a head and a long tail. ATP energy changes the position of the myosin heads, compressing them like springs. When the calcium ions appear, they uncover binding sites on the actin filaments. The myosin heads attach and snap back to their normal position, which powers the motion. Each head can flex 5 times per second, shortening the muscle in an action scientists call the sliding filament model. When the nerve impulses stop, the calcium ions return to storage, and the muscle cell relaxes.
The sliding filament model is essentially that. One type of filament structure within the muscle is sliding by another type of structure. And the myosin comes into contact with the actin and actually allows the actin to slide by.
The regular arrangement of actin and myosin molecules creates the typical light-dark banding pattern of skeletal muscle. When these proteins slide past each other, they can shorten the length of a muscle by up to 60%. But during extended trips in space, animals lose many of the proteins which cause their muscle to contract.
The atrophying process probably starts as soon as the animal gets into orbit. And over time, this translates to about a 40% loss in muscle mass.
With the loss of actin and myosin, the muscles get weaker. But this is only part of the story. Tissue samples reveal a related problem with muscle endurance.
There are fast muscle fibers that fatigue very rapidly. There are slow muscle fibers that are basically non-fatigable. There are approximately 80% of the muscle fibers in here are stained slow. That is, they have this light staining appearance to them. The other 20% have this fast or dark staining appearance. Here we've got the cross-section of the soleus muscle that was exposed to 14 days of space flight. And the picture is much different. Here you can see that the population of dark staining muscle fibers, it's up around 50% or so. This will dramatically increase the fatigability of this muscle.
The muscle has less stamina, and this is exactly what we see with the astronauts. The astronauts lose strength, they lose motor skills, motor capabilities.
So astronauts, like all animals, must work to maintain both endurance and strength. We build endurance through repetitive, low-resistance training that maintains the size and amount of slow fibers. We build strength by heavy resistance exercise that increases the amount of actin and myosin, adding bulk.
What we basically have to do is to devise the machinery to force an individual to do heavy resistance training in space. And all of the research that has been undertaken to the present time suggests that we're just not using the right form of exercise, at least in terms of maintaining the integrity of our skeletal muscles and the integrity of the bone system.
The question now is what's going to happen to these muscles during long duration space flights, such as the planned mission to Mars? Will astronauts be able to truly carry out the functions that they are being sent there to perform?
Studying muscles in microgravity may not only permit long-term space travel, it may also bring home solutions to earthbound maladies which affect us all.
There may be ways in which we can make individuals more functional to much later stages in the aging process. There's a lot to go in terms of understanding some of the degenerative diseases such as muscular dystrophy and some of these other health problems that have sort of a genetic origin to them.
In the nearly 40 years that I've been in the business, I think I've seen horses with ability that have come in all sizes and all shapes.
The great variety we see in animals depends in part on the structure and support provided by the skeletal system. And in a thoroughbred, the right combination of bones and soft tissue can add up to much more than good health.
Our third horse of the day is going to be our big horse of the day. It's going to run in the feature race at Pomona. It's a horse named Flying Sensation. Some of the physical attributes that we like about this horse is the slope of his shoulder and the size of his neck and crest. We like the shoulder sloped at about 45 degrees. And then he has a nice, strong withers and back, fairly short back. Makes for a nice, strong riding area. And then he has a very nice hip. He's an average-sized horse that has good bone density, that has good, strong-looking legs.
The strength and rigidity of most animal skeletons reveal their most obvious role: protection.
One important function of the skeleton for an animal like a human or a horse would be to protect soft tissues. For example, our skull protects our brain, and our vertebral column protects the spinal cord. Another function is that it defines the shape and provides support for the body. The skeleton also provides the basis for muscles to move the body. Muscles are attached to bones, and they function like levers to enable us to walk or locomote in other ways and interact with the surrounding environment.
Other services provided by the skeleton result from the dynamic nature of bone as a living organ.
The skeleton also is important in maintaining a state of homeostasis with the rest of the organism. There's an exchange of minerals between bones and the surrounding tissues, and it helps the body maintain, for example, a constant concentration of calcium, which is important for muscle and nerve function. Finally, the skeleton includes other components, such as tissues that are responsible for the synthesis of red blood cells.
We can see the living nature of bones in their ability to repair themselves and to grow.
Our program is one of developing young horses. It's exactly like an athlete. You have to build a foundation before you can draw upon it to expect the horse to perform at his peak performance.
One of the important features of bone is that it's a flexible tissue. It can change shape in response to various kinds of stresses. And one of the most important sources of shape change in bone is the process of growth.
When a foal is born of any breed, they already have about 2/3 of the length of their long leg bones. These continue to grow rather rapidly up until about 18 to 20 months of age, and then the growth stage slows down. And by 24 to 26 months, why, they've attained all the long bone growth that they're going to.
The outer edge of the long bone is what we refer to as compact bone. That's solid, supportive material. However, the ends of the bone are actually spongy. They consist of thin layers or sheets of bone that are interlaced in sort of a network-like fashion.
This network of bones provides the structure our muscles use to move us about. But how we move depends on the way these two systems interact as levers.
You can think of vertebrates as being like muscle and bone machines when they move. Because muscles can only contract, they only can get shorter, you have to have muscles in opposable pairs or working in opposition to one another. When my biceps contracts and closes up this joint, what it does is stretch the muscle that's at the back of the arm, my triceps. My triceps is now in a position where it can contract and move in the opposite direction, and as it does so, it stretches out the biceps.
The advantage of any lever system is determined by the position of the fulcrum, in this case, the joint. Each animal has different needs and therefore a different design. For example, nature built this horse's limbs for speed, but designed the digging arm of this armadillo for power.
In the armadillo, there's a very long extension, and when the triceps contracts, you can generate a lot of force with this range of motion. In the horse, there's a very short extension, so the amount of force that can be generated is much less, but it turns out that there's a trade-off, because even though the force that you can generate is less, the speed with which the limb will move when the muscle contracts is much greater.
This horse has a very strong upper arm here, has good bone down through here, down through the cannon bone, and very nice hind leg on this horse, nice and muscular.
What horses are doing are going through life as if they were towing ballerinas on the tips of their toes. The motor generates the force in one area. That force is transmitted to some distant part of the body through tendons functioning as cables. Tendons are actually a specialized type of connective tissue, and they consist of cells that extend out and intertwine with the neighboring cells. The bone itself has similar cells along the surface of the bone, and you have these tendrils that actually will penetrate into the bone. At the other end of the tendon, where it invests into the muscle, you actually have sheets of similar connective tissues that run through the full length of the muscle.
In all animals, connective tissue blends from muscle to tendon to bone. And while it can become strained, this soft tissue normally performs with amazing strength. But external forces can often damage the most vulnerable components of these living lever systems, the joints.
When a horse runs, the joints don't just move. The limbs are constantly pounding against the ground, and so that portion of the movable joint is also subject to a constant amount of stress. The first important feature of a joint is that the ends of the bones which come into contact with one another are coated with a special kind of cartilage which is extremely smooth but also has fairly spongy properties. The ends of the bones are also attached to one another with special kinds of connective tissue which are called ligaments. Ligaments, by definition, join bones to bones, whereas tendons join muscles to bones.
In the thoroughbred breed, 2/3 of the weight of the animal is carried on the front legs. They're more prone to injuries of the front legs. And this occurs in the knee, or technically the carpus.
We have had our problems with Flying Sensation when he chipped an ankle and we had to do arthroscopic surgery on him.
When chip fractures occur, then those are taken out surgically. Now these radiographs show where a big chip has broken off in that area, off the bottom edge of that radiocarpal bone, and you'll notice through here that it stands out. This chip should be taken out.
With arthroscopic surgery, we were able to remove that chip, and he had 3 to 4 months rest and then was placed back in training. And so we're kind of anxious to see how he runs today, because it appears in his first start, which was about 3 weeks ago, that he still has the old fire and gameness that he displayed as a 2-year-old. It's extremely gratifying to us to see a flying sensation come along and display all the characteristics that you've worked so hard to develop in these thoroughbreds.
To survive in a challenging world, complex animals use specialized body structures, each with a different function. Shaped of common tissues, these organs and organ systems constantly work to maintain homeostasis, protecting their internal environment. With this ability, animals have evolved into a dizzying array of forms, each designed to meet the extraordinary challenges of the natural world.